Fair warning, this show contains strong language and adult themes from time to time. Sorry, Jerry can't help it.
Sick Boy Wolfgang Productions presents The Offering with Jerry Horror. A deep dive into the history of film and its filmmakers. Mostly horror, always genre.
Attention horror movie buffs. Remember the good old days back when Netflix would actually deliver physical media to your mailbox? How often do you find yourself reminiscing about those trips to your local video store, sifting through every single collection, discovering a movie treasure that you've never seen before? If niche is your knack, then Mailbox Movies is the DVD delivery service for you. Their meticulously curated collection has something for every horror enthusiast. With simple online ordering and speedy DVD delivery right to your front door, Mailbox Movies has unbeatable prices that will give you more screams for your buck. Remember to use the promo code JerryHorror for 50% off your first month. Don't settle for less. Get the best in horror delivered to your door. Head on over to mailboxmovies.com and start your terrifying movie marathon today. Knows Best Candles is a soy wax candle company owned by two Long Island natives turned Manhattanites. They hand pour small batches of cheeky candles that inspire the euphoric feeling of synesthesia. They've got diffusers, room sprays, bundles, and gift cards are always available as well. Each Knows Best candle pairs an enchanting dual fragrance with a curated Spotify playlist to help set your mood at home. Not to mention, the names of the candles are a conversation starter themselves. Bestsellers include Safe Word, Midday Nap, and my personal favorite, Bitch Goddess. The perfect scents to burn while listening to your favorite podcast. That's right, The Offering. Remember to use promo code JerryHorror20 to automatically save 20% off your order. Stop paying for overpriced basic bitch candles. Spoil yourself or your loved ones with Knows Best candles. Welcome to The Offering with Jerry Horror, the show where we can have a quiet and frank discussion as adults about the things that matter to me, or at least that I think matter to me. Please take a moment to subscribe to our show wherever you get fine podcasts, and hey, stay up to date on future episodes. Coming up, the most expensive movie made in 1987. A film that was made as a secret ruse to sell a theme park ride. A script so bad that they let the lead actor write his own dialogue. This is The Offering Season 4, and this time, it's personal. Ladies and gentlemen, freaks behind the paywall, my name is Jerry Horror. This is The Offering. Welcome back. Hey, if it's your first time listening, this is the beginning of Season 4. We pulled out all the stops for you this season. It's going to be crazy. Please, don't stop listening right now on my account. Keep it going. Maybe you're cooking dinner. Maybe you're in the car driving to work. I don't know what you're doing, but you're here. You're with me, and I appreciate it. So a lot has happened between last season and this season. I've been on a journey. I hate when people say this. They're like, I've been on a weight loss journey, but I have been. I've been on a weight loss journey. I've been on a fitness journey. Everybody's on a fucking journey like it's Lord of the Rings or something. Do you get what I'm saying? Like, it's absolutely crazy. Yeah, but Narnia aside, in all seriousness, I've been losing weight. I've been putting on muscle, getting my health in order, because there was really one thing that was, well, there's many things in my life. I mean, this is not limited to, but my health was just out of control. You know, my doctor had given me a death sentence, essentially. Like, you're going to die in 3 years. And like, it sounds funny, but until you're in the doctor's office and they're telling you that, it's like, holy I'm going to die in 3 years. You know, I was like, this is not good. I also want to ascertain how they got 3 years exactly. You know, I don't know, because you wonder, like, was the doctor just pulling that out of her ass? Where she's like, it's 3 years, you know, like it's some kind of curse, like it's a Sam Raimi movie, you know, like in 3 years' time, you're going to pass away. Why 3 years? What, can't I make it to the next president? Can I? Country is so divided right now. It is. This is an election year, and it is terrible. I feel like we're living through a direct-to-video Purge sequel. Actually, election year was one of the sequels. God. Oh, Blumhouse just moved into the video game space. They got a whole slate of games coming out. They look pretty good, too. I'm going to be honest, because let's face it, that's where the money is. The money is in the video games. Everybody knows it. Do a Purge video game. Do it GTA style, and you could build factions. You could be a vigilante. You could be a part of the founding fathers. It would be really cool. In my head, conceptually, there's a really cool, mature-rated Purge game to be made. This is Jerry going off on a tangent, obviously. This is me begging Blumhouse, please let me develop a Purge video game. They'll never let me near anything. They won't even let me near Megan. I think there's Megan's Law about that. Is that in poor taste? That's in poor taste. So yeah, I've been going through a lot. Things have been changing. There's a lot of stuff to get excited about. You know, we were talking with Larry Fessenden, and he talked about creating the storyline and how they wrote the script for Until Dawn, previous episode. Check that out. I love Until Dawn, and it's obviously right now, as you're listening to this, it's coming back to the PlayStation. It's going to be on PS5. It's going to be on PC, and it's a complete remaster. They went back. They redid the graphics, the sound. It looks incredible. If you haven't seen the trailer, it's up on YouTube. It's in 4K. Really, really beautiful job they did. And I will tell you, it is an oddity because it's a video game horror movie that you can play, but it is a beloved classic. I played it many times just to get the different branching storylines and paths. I'm a big fan of it. So it's great to see that it's living on and it's going to be presented to a new generation with incredible graphics and sound. Yeah, I really hope that people get a chance to play Until Dawn, even if it's for the first time. It really is a killer game, no pun intended. I had a lot of fun with it, and I can't wait now to revisit it, especially in this new fidelity. They've changed some things, they've upgraded things, and it's going to be really exciting to play it again. So I made all these changes in my life, trying to beat my doctor. Everything that I do is just petty. Everything is just about being petty. So I can say 3 years from now, oh, fuck you, I didn't die. You're a shitty doctor. You know, like, and she's like, well, isn't that good? I'm like, you know, like I'm always just trying to prove somebody wrong. That's like 90% of what this podcast is just me being petty about some shit. It's taken on a life of its own, this whole training thing. Like a lot of people think that getting in shape is easy. If you're lean, let's say you're pretty lean to begin with and you put on some muscle, yeah, sure, you can get in shape pretty quickly, but it doesn't work that way. Like when you're like me and you're fucking morbidly obese, it's like we're grinding down those pounds, slowly but surely, just taking off the inches. I wish I could add a few more inches. Sorry, I couldn't help myself. There's like this really shitty vaudeville comedian inside of me that's like looking to get out. It's like Shecky Green. Like if I was possessed, if this was an Exorcist situation, I would be possessed by like an 85-year-old Jewish comedian, and it would be amazing. I'd be in the Catskills eating lox. Regardless, people think like, oh, I'm going to get in shape, and there's going to be a montage. And it's crazy because like everybody's living their lives. Like, you know, Pete's like going to weddings and he's doing this and that. And like, you know, my friend is making a movie. Sean's got Screamwalkers coming out. He was in the Boarding House episode. Sick plug. You know what we do. In all seriousness, though, it's crazy because my life is just one big training montage constantly. It's like literally, it's Rocky IV. You cue Rocky IV. You cue the Karate Kid. And it's like, it's gotten to the point where I use that music. I had really never listened to Survivor's Moment of Truth. I listen to it all the time now. I listen to like Bloodsport, previous episode. I listen to the Kumite song all the time, Fight to Survive. And this stuff really gets me gassed up because I think to myself, I'm like, well, those were the montages. So I'm in my own endless montage, but it's not quick. People think like, oh, couple of months in the gym. No. It's a lifestyle change. Changing your habits, changing what you eat, making sure you're getting enough sleep. It's a lot of work. Like, I'm not going to kid you, but I promise you, dear listener, I am getting in great shape, and I'm just going to keep going and doing my best. And I think people always ask me like, Jerry, what's your secret? No one's ever asked me that. But if they did, I will tell you the number one secret that I've learned is you have to be kind to yourself. You have to just, dude, you think it's going to work. You're going to take steroids, you're going to do this, and all of a sudden you're going to have a six-pack and gigantic biceps. You got to work for it. It is a slow grind. And I'm going to tell you, I know why people don't do this. And I'm going to tell you why. It's because it's hard and it takes time. So be kind to yourself and also be patient with yourself. I just do this now. I'm on automatic. I go and I hit the gym at least 5 days a week. I'm hitting it hard. I'm lifting weights, started doing cardio. I do my boxing and my MMA stuff. Last night I was laying down and I fell asleep on my arm, which I often do, and then your arm falls asleep, that whole thing. And I'm like and I'm like, oh my God, I feel this hard thing. And I'm like, what is that? I'm like, do I have cancer? It's it's middle of the night. Do I have cancer? No, it's muscles. Like muscles are building. So sometimes you forget about it. And it's weird. There's this weird body dysmorphia thing that you go through where it's like, oh no, wait, I can wear a smaller size. I can do this. And it's very liberating. Being able to buy like 2XL or XL boxer briefs is a big deal because when you're fat, you have no choices. Oh, you can have olive green or hot orange. And now it's like the slimmer you get, it's like, oh no, you can have like 20 different colors and do all this stuff. So this world is still opening up to me. And that's the greatest thing. You lose weight and you can become a consumer. Spend money, They Live, previous episode. You know what we do, sick plug. We're doing some interesting things. We got a lot going on here in the offering world. I think you're going to be surprised, pleasantly, hopefully. This is going to be a crazy season. Seriously. You got to strap in for this one, man. This is not for the weak of heart. We've got some really wacky movies this year. So every season, look, we keep everything very secretive, and there's a reason we do that. And the reason that I believe, the reason that I do it, is because when you pick the movies for the season, it's like a playlist. And you want to make sure that it's carefully curated, but most importantly, I want to make sure that nobody else is doing the movies that we're doing. And there's a specific reason for that, because when you follow the algorithm, right? And it's like, okay, there's a new Aliens movie coming out. So everybody does their own version of it. They do one of the movies in the canon. And it becomes very like, like everybody's doing it. It doesn't feel special. So what I try to do is I try to just put together this playlist. And when I started out, there were 29 films chosen for season 4. We whittled it down, kept whittling it down. And, what's the right movie to do? What order should we be doing them in? And again, that's just curation. I always say content is nothing without curation. That's why I love Shudder. Hey, folks at Shudder, we're willing to do an ad for you if you give us some free Shudder, or get Joe, Bob, and Darcy to come to our next barbecue. I don't know, make something happen. We'll do it. But Shudder is great because they curate the content expertly. They know exactly what they're putting on there. They've got their little subsections. You got your subgenres of slashers and this and that. It's great. It's great. I can't say enough good things about their programming, seriously. So with that being said, this season is about films that were non-franchise starters, okay, but also franchise fatigue. I guess the operative word is The Offering Season 4, franchise mania. I don't know. But we talk about this a lot. My friend Sean King and I, we talk about non-franchise starters. And these are movies that were set up ostensibly like, we're going to make 20 of these. This is going to be a trilogy. We're going to be riding this until the cows come home. And ultimately that doesn't happen. They just put out the one movie, and there's never sequels. There's never nothing. There's also movies in this season that were franchise killers, that they had a franchise, they had sequels, it was successful, and this movie just killed the whole fucking thing. And it's crazy because, look, history dictates, we've seen this. And I mean, when franchise non-starters, I mean movies that would have given birth to a whole new universe. And I got to tell you, today we're starting with one of the most notorious franchise killers of all time. It stopped this series dead in its tracks. There still hasn't been a sequel. I don't know, maybe a remake someday. It will probably happen at some point. You're going to have to stay tuned till after the break to find out what I'm talking about. But I would say 10 out of 10, 5 out of 5. This is the most notorious of all the franchise killers. Stay tuned after the break. You're going to find out what that is. And hey, welcome back. It's season 4. Let's get it. Look, let's face it, folks. None of the Jaws sequels live up to the first film. How could they? You know, it's one of those things when you make such an iconic movie as Jaws, a stone cold modern classic, it doesn't matter what you do because you just can't top that first movie. You can make sequels, you can make money. You have to always up the stakes. There always has to be like, I have to say, like the Meg 2 was very good. It was a very bad movie, but at least, hey, we've got octopus in here. We've got some other sharks. You know, they throw some stuff into the mix to say this is somewhat different and that the stakes are elevated. And that seems to be something that we always see. Recently, I just saw Bad Boys for Life. No, that was the third movie, excuse me, which I did watch again, which they should have called Bad Boys for Life. Get it? Like number 4. But this one's called Ride or Die. And it's one of these things where it's like they keep upping the ante as far as the action sequences go, and it just gets crazier and crazier. It gets to the point where it's like, I'm out of this movie. Literally, even with the Fast and the Furious movies, the set pieces and everything gets so crazy that you're like, wasn't this movie about street racing? Wasn't Paul Walker ordering tuna fish sandwiches? Like, what happened to this franchise? Now we're in space? So obviously, today's film is Jaws: The Revenge, also known as Jaws 4: The Revenge. We'll get into that, the title of this film, because that varies by region, which is so weird.
Instinctively, man has always been drawn to the sea. Its beauty, its mystery, its secrets. But there is also a vague uncertainty, a sense of intrusion into an alien world, where man is unwelcome and completely at the mercy of the most terrifying predator on Earth. Man's deepest fear has risen again. Jaws: The Revenge. This time, it's personal.
So let me preface this with a little story of personal experience. One year I was volunteering for the Catholic Charities. And essentially what we would do is there's like group homes of people who are like, you know, they have disabilities or they have mental impairments, head injuries, conditions. And what we do is we would volunteer to help out with some of these residents so that the people who actually do this 365 days a year could have, you know, a nice Easter with their family. That being said, I did my best to take care of these adults who were, you know, differently abled and whatnot. And I was in this gigantic living room, which they had, and I'm there with a bunch of these people, and nobody can decide what to watch. We're all trying to figure out, it's Easter Sunday. Everybody just had dinner. What are we going to watch? So luckily, AMC comes in on the clutch, and I'm like, well, there's nothing on. We've been watching hours of reruns. They did a Fresh Prince marathon, which is awesome. But eventually, you know, you get tired of Carlton Banks. You got to switch it up. So I'm like, listen, there's nothing on. We're putting on Jaws: The Revenge. And I will tell you, that movie kept the attention of about 8 mentally challenged people. And that is probably its testament. And look, we watched the movie. It's not a good movie, but it's entertaining. Some people, you know, they say that shit like, oh, just turn your brain off. Or it's so bad, it's good. No, this is just a bad movie. So, like, I know that you're listening to this show and you're saying to yourself, Jerry's going to tell us about this hidden classic. Jaws: The Revenge is not a hidden classic. It doesn't need to be revisited. It doesn't need to be, we watched it again 30 years later and we discovered that this film is one of the most important touchstones in cinematic history. That is not the case. Jaws: The Revenge has many bizarre origins, so let's get into it. So where were we? This was around 82, 83. The original concept for Jaws 3 was that it was going to be Jaws 3, People Zero. It was going to be a comedy film in the vein of Airplane. They were going to do a Jaws spoof as the third movie. Because at that point, everybody felt like we got away with Jaws 2. We did it by the skin of our teeth. People liked it. We made money off of it. But can we really keep this series going? The answer is yes, we have to keep this series going because sequels plus money, and that's all that matters. So they just really couldn't figure out, what are we going to do? So then they're like, okay. So we're going to do Jaws 3 as a TV movie of the week for ABC television. And that was their plan. And then all of a sudden, as they started prepping up Jaws 3 for the TV movie of the week, they're like, wait a second, we can shoot this in 3D? Yeah. There's all this new technology available that Reflex is putting out, and we can compete. So Friday the 13th Part 3D comes out, and it makes a ton of money. And everybody's like, wow, we should do a 3D movie. In 83, especially, 82, there's this short period. I want to say it's from 82 to 86. People tried bringing 3D back. They showed Creature from the Black Lagoon in 3D. On television, you had to get the glasses at 7-Eleven. It was a big thing. And ultimately, 3D had kind of this mini revival because it was all these people that were nostalgic from the late 50s, early 60s about 3D. This was a craze, especially in the film industry. Ultimately, what happens is Friday the 13th Part 3D goes on to gross $30 million in 1983 money, which is a lot, which would be $70 million today because of inflation. So why not shoot Jaws in 3D? It was the time to cash in. Let's do it. So despite all odds, Jaws 3D made a ton of money. How much money? Try $45 million by the end of summer. Again, adjusted for inflation. We know that's quite a sum of money. And up until that point, it was the highest opening weekend for a 3D movie up until Avatar. It was one of the biggest opening weekends of the year. Most critics, though, absolutely hated Jaws 3D. And obviously, it's rough around the edges, to say the least. Some of the stuff holds up, some of it doesn't. There's no family. Jaws 3D is essentially a slasher film with Dennis Quaid. Believe it or not, Jaws 3D made less money than Jaws 1 and 2. So even though it did $45 million, which was a huge box office take at that time, it wasn't because Jaws, adjusted for inflation, is a $1 billion movie. It truly is the first blockbuster. Before Star Wars, it's I wasn't there, but if you look, people were waiting on lines for hours, and it was just this huge thing. It was a huge part of the cultural zeitgeist, the music, the theme, everything. Jaws was everywhere. People had Jaws fever, and this is before they got the Star Wars fever. And they never found a vaccine for that, which is, why people still have Star Wars fever to this day. Donate money now to Disney+. Now, shockingly at the time, Universal said, you know what? We made our money, because they didn't even want to make this third movie. They were going to make a spoof movie. So they're like, we have no immediate plans to make a sequel to Jaws 3D. They were kind of embarrassed by it. They knew what they did. Universal realized one thing early on, though. They needed product for home video because it was an explosive market in the mid-'80s. I mean, VHS was absolutely booming at this time. So what happens is they're like, wow, we're making a lot of money off of cable, off of VHS. We need more product to be on store shelves. So in 1986, Howard the Duck comes out, and it's an absolute flop. And it almost took out Universal because they spent a lot of money. Now, some people, there's differing reports. Some people say they lost $70 million. Some people say they lost close to $120 million on Howard the Duck. There's rumors that George Lucas had to be brought in by mandate of Universal to ghost direct most of Howard the Duck because they were getting the dailies back and they're like, what is this, as a young first-time director, like, what is this guy doing? He was an effects artist. Like, this is terrible. So that's allegedly. But I think it happened. I think they called in George Lucas, and he's like, oh, I can fix Howard the Duck. That's fine. I'll make it a good movie for you. Make money, No, it didn't, George. And that's why we're here, because Universal is in a financial disaster because of this. So they take this nosedive. Any way you slice it, Howard the Duck almost took Universal down. They needed to make some surefire hits that would generate cash quickly. They figured if they did a movie that was closer to the tone of the original film, more of a family story, not like the slasher film vibe of Jaws 3D, that they could make this work. And believe it or not, even though this is more common today, they were going to retcon the series. They were going to basically say, okay, Jaws 2 and 3 didn't happen, and only Jaws happened, and we're going to make a sequel. And they've done that. Like, they did that last year. Not last year, it was like 5 years ago now. Pandemic brain with David Gordon Green's Halloween, where it's like, we're going to ignore a bunch of the sequels and just tie this back to the original film. This was a new thing. Back then, they didn't do this. They were always trying to stay like, wow, we have to stay in the continuity of the sequel. So one way or the other, Jaws 4 was going to come out in the summer of 1987. Hell or high water, this was going to happen. The studio did as much as they could internally to get the project moving. Now, Sid Sheinberg, he was the head of Universal for a long time. He had shepherded Spielberg. He had shepherded the original Jaws. Basically, at that point, he's functioning as a CEO, and he says, listen, we need to move into the theme park space. We need to make Universal Studios a theme park juggernaut like Disney, because there's no competitor. There's no competitor to Disney. And now with the way things are going, they got this Epic Universe coming out. They're going head to head with Disney. And spoiler alert, they're kicking Disney's ass. They've got higher attendance rates. People are happier with those parks. I can't say enough good things about Universal Studios. I've always had fantastic experiences with their theme park stuff. It's great. More importantly, Sid Sheinberg says to himself, this is the perfect way to promote the ride and synergy within theme parks of the films. Everybody knows Jaws. They're going to want to go on the Jaws ride. And again, for 1983, 84, this is like way ahead of its time. He's thinking way ahead of the game, because this stuff now is like, oh, well, there's brand synergy and we'll do a ride and we'll do this. And they know there's like a 5-year plan of how to do all this shit. But back then there wasn't. They were inventing the formula as it went along. So this film, Jaws 4, ostensibly as it was called, it was greenlit in September 1986, and they had no screenplay. They just knew that they wanted to go back to the family dynamic. So then CEO of the company, Sid Sheinberg, immediately called close friend director Joseph Sargent, who arguably had made a lot of classics, like The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3, science fiction classic Colossus, The Forbin Project. That's a really good movie. If you've never seen it, check it out. Burt Reynolds, his moonshine opus, White Lightning. Another, look, you want to see Burt Reynolds in a bizarre action drama where he's selling moonshine? White Lightning is your picture. He had an experience in a variety of films, Sargent, but he hadn't had a hit in a long time. He starts doing TV movies, and then he kind of falls into the trap. So more importantly, Sid Sheinberg knows that he can trust Joseph Sargent, and more importantly, he knows that he can control him, and he'll do what he's got to do to get this picture made. So he says, Joe, this is my baby, and you can have total creative control. You can be a producer on the film, but I need you to pull off a hat trick. I need a miracle. I need a movie that people will love. I need a human story here, Joe, not spectacle, not special effects. And the only thing that I ask is that you get this movie as fast as possible into theaters for early summer. Sargent accepted the challenge, mainly because he knew that he would largely be left alone to do whatever he wanted with a decent-sized studio budget. So obviously Joseph took the job, which is incredible because he worked on everything. I mean, this guy, 50 years in the film business. Unfortunately for Joseph Sargent, Jaws the Revenge would be his final theatrically released film. And early on, Sargent told Sid Sheinberg, hey, look, wait a second. We made a lot of money with that 3D movie. Maybe we should shoot this one in 3D again. So Scheinberg calls the Reflex camera company, and they basically tell him, look, if you plan on shooting this on the water, anywhere in salt water or tropical climate, these new cameras, they can't be controlled, and it's just not going to work. So they're like, all right, well, we want to do a lot of underwater stuff. We want to do some different things with this movie that we didn't do with Jaws 3D. And Reflex was like, listen, we've just developed this whole new line of cameras, but it's not going to work. So the decision was to shoot the film on Super 35 millimeter, which was still a relatively new technology. And I think Reflex talked Scheinberg and Universal out of shooting this in 3D because they wanted to see what this Super 35 millimeter could really do. It was a camera that was able to capture more ambient light and would actually help with the underwater sequences. More importantly, it was an early precursor to IMAX. And if you look at the film cells, they're actually just a little bit larger than the average 35 millimeter film cell. This was the first movie that Universal had ever shot in Super 35. And I'll be honest with you, like right now, we're watching it, the film looks great. The Super 35 stuff, I wish they would have shot more movies using these cameras because everything looks beautiful, and the underwater stuff, it really pops because it's picking up all of that reflected natural light from the sun. So early on, right after Jaws 3D comes out, there's a fourth script that was written. And eventually what happens is Universal's head of production, Frank Price, he resigns in September 1986, and he takes the brunt of the fall of Howard the Duck. So they shelve that script. And this is what happens. When a studio gets a new regime in, they generally throw everything out because they're like, I don't want that person to make money. I don't want any of their decisions to affect where we are. Sargent takes the reins and basically says, hey, listen, you need a script? I got this guy who Spielberg really likes, so let's go with him. Enter Michael de Guzman. Now, Joseph Sargent told writer Michael de Guzman that we need something special about this movie. Maybe we could take it into a more magical direction, a little bit supernatural, to make this movie stand out from the others. That was their first mistake. Michael de Guzman had most recently written for television. He worked on the hit show Amazing Stories. A bunch of his scripts got turned into episodes, and Steven Spielberg was in fact a fan of his work. Now, de Guzman told Sargent that he hadn't seen Jaws 2 or 3. And Scheinberg said, hey, listen, that's fine. Those movies sucked. So you can go right ahead and write Jaws 4. This is going to be perfect because it's a direct sequel to the first movie. It has nothing to do with the 2 and 3 in the canon. So the script needed to be completed and approved in 5 weeks with no rewrites. The shooting script itself would be completed as the film was already in production, which for Offering listeners, we already know this is a big no-no, right? Like you can't keep writing the script as the movie's going. You need to have a solid script locked in before an inch of film rolls. Now, according to de Guzman, they had the bare bones of a story by October 1986, and by the 2nd of November, they had a workable outline for the production team. The first draft was finally completed in December 86. The final draft would be done in late January, 9 days before the movie would start filming. The film was developed under the working title Jaws 87, but by February of 1987, the title Jaws: The Revenge was being used. Shockingly, the film was actually retitled Jaws 87 in Japan, where it became a sizable hit. The Japanese loved Jaws: The Revenge. Scheinberg did not want to call the film Jaws 4 because he wanted audiences to see this as a refresh and a reset to the property. Again, this is commonplace stuff now, but back then it was pretty inventive. Numbers have become like a dirty thing in the film industry. Like John Wick does it. John Wick does, 1, 2, 3, 4. But a lot of them are like Planet of the Apes, Rise of the Apes, or Kingdom of the Apes. They don't want you to know that this is like the 26th film in a franchise. Because people, they see the number and they're like, oh, well, do I have to see all the other ones? No, come on in. You don't have to see anything. Just watch this movie. We'll take your money. We don't give a shit. De Guzman's script featured a cameo by Matt Hooper, originally played by Richard Dreyfuss, and the producers were holding out hope to get old Richie Dreyfuss back into the project. At the time, Dreyfuss was busy doing Stakeout with Emilio Estevez. The rumor being that Dreyfuss told his agent that there was no way in hell that I would go back and do this film. So they figured, all right, let's approach Roy Scheider. It's been a number of years since Jaws 2, and Scheider has been quoted as saying to Sheinberg himself, "Satan himself couldn't get me to do another one of those pictures. I have no interest in playing the role again, and as far as I'm concerned, Brody is dead." So that's where they come up with the idea in the script that they'll just start with Roy Scheider's character being the first one to die. Like, we'll just write this, and if we can get him on set for a couple of days, we'll just kill him off in less than 10 minutes. And they begged Roy Scheider to come back for just one day to shoot some stuff on the dock. And eventually they get him to appear in a flashback. It's stuff from previous movies, but that was all he would sign off on. Now, apparently, they said, look, you come back, you shoot stuff, we're going to be in Martha's Vineyard, one day, couple of hours. Roy Scheider called Sheinberg back and said, go fuck yourself. Don't ever call me again if it has anything to do with Jaws. Scheider went on record and he said, he's like, Jaws 2 was a mistake. And he was against what he believed as far as doing sequels to the film. He's like, it's just a cheap imitation of the original. He did state, though, for the record, that the check cleared for Jaws 2 and that his kids appreciated it that Christmas. Luckily, Murray Hamilton, one of my favorites, he played the Amity Mayor Larry Vaughn in the first two Jaws films, and Hamilton agreed to reprise his role for Jaws: The Revenge. But he died suddenly before production began, so they basically just wrote his character out of the script. Just so we're keeping score for the kids at home, Dreyfuss doesn't want in, Scheider doesn't want in, poor old Mayor Larry Vaughn dropped dead before they could shoot the movie. As we work our way down the ladder, can we get Dennis Quaid, who is in the third film? And Dennis Quaid politely declined. He's like, I have no interest. And he was actually off with Joe Dante shooting Inner Space. Inner Space is a great movie. Martin Short, really liked that movie. Now, luckily, they were able to get Lorraine Gray to return as Ellen Brody in this film. She was essentially the only connective tissue to the first film. She was in the first two films. In this film, she would be taking the lead. Now, did I mention that Lorraine Gray was married to Sid Sheinberg? That's right, folks. Nepotism will get you everywhere. Sheinberg had always promised his wife a big studio picture with all the trimmings where she would be the star. And yes, Jaws 4 would be that picture. This would be Lorraine Gray's final film, mainly because she was so embarrassed by this movie that she never acted again. She knew this movie was a stinker and that she was essentially the face of it, and she was completely embarrassed by this to all the people who went to her country club. They were like, oh, we saw Jaws. We didn't see that. I don't even want to know. Gary states that one of the only reasons she was really attracted to the film was that they had already cast Michael Caine, and it would be nice to do a romantic lead with him. Oh, did I mention they cast Michael Caine? So, Michael Caine asked for $1.5 million for 1 week's work, and as per his agreement, he would only shoot in the Bahamas. He had no interest in being on the East Coast while it was nasty and cold. Sheinberg had no choice, so he was bent over a barrel, and they paid him everything he wanted and more. However, Caine later claimed, I have never seen the film, but by all accounts, it is terrible. However, I have seen the house that I built, and it's terrific. My wife loves that house. In his 1992 autobiography, What's It All About?, he says that the film will go down in my memory as the time when I won an Oscar, paid for a house, had a great holiday, not bad for a flop movie if I say so myself. Caine would win an Oscar that year for Best Supporting Actor in Hannah and Her Sisters. However, the Oscars were taking place the week that he was shooting Jaws, because he's literally there for a week. He would not be able to attend the Oscars. So his Academy Award was accepted by good friend Sigourney Weaver. So no matter, listen, in life, we've got highs and lows. The highest of highs being winning an Oscar, and the lowest of lows being in the Bahamas, shooting Jaws 4 while said Oscar is being presented. Lance Guest played Ellen's oldest son, Mike. Guest had dropped out of his sophomore year at UCLA to appear in another sequel to a horror classic, Halloween 2. He was the love interest. He was the EMT worker in Halloween 2. Guest hadn't had a hit since his starring role in The Last Starfighter, which was '84, so he was very happy to get the project. Because they're thinking, When they made The Last Starfighter, they're like, oh, this is going to be the next Star Wars. We're going to make, that's another franchise non-starter. We're going to do 10 of these. You know, this is going to be the biggest movie ever. And by all accounts, when The Last Starfighter was tested with audiences, they loved it. People went nuts for it. Kids liked it. It just, for whatever reason, didn't become the juggernaut that they had hoped it would. So Lance Guest, he ain't doing much. Very happy to get on Jaws 4. Karen Young would go on to play Lance Guest's wife, Carla, in this movie. She was happy to get the part. Young actress. She just came out of a bunch of doing soaps for television. And then we've got Mario Van Peebles doing the worst Jamaican accent on earth. I'm going to be honest with you. Like, we talk about, like, you know, doing like blackface or yellow face or things of this nature. This is African-American man Mario Van Peebles doing Jamaican face. He is terrible in this movie. He's entertaining to watch. And this character was so corny. It got so ridiculous that de Guzman, who was writing the script, because they're rewriting the script as this movie's going on set, they just said, you know what? We don't want to write anything that's stupid. So we're just going to have you make up your own dialogue, and you'll know the other actors' sides and you'll know what they're going to say. But if you want, you can write your own dialogue and improvise stuff. And he was like, all right, fine. Honestly, it's one of Van Peebles' worst performances. And I say this as a man who starred in a couple of direct-to-video bangers with Christopher Lambert. So, yeah, that's saying something. The film would largely be shot on location. Filming started the first week of November in 1986. They would start in Martha's Vineyard. For, like, whatever crazy reason, they had a bunch of these huge snowstorms. And the storms affected the production from the very first day they tried to start. They actually went back to a lot of the places where they shot the first film, and they thought it would add a good sense of continuity for the audience and characters. It's brief, but you really do feel like you're back in Amity. And again, like, this is, 10, 15 minutes of the opening of this movie, and they nail it. You really think that you're there. What's crazy, too, is that Jaws 4 is set entirely during winter. The other movies are summer movies because they're on the beach. It's a shark. You know, that's kind of the nature of the whole thing. But yes, so if you're asking, Jaws, The Revenge is a Christmas movie, and it's happening during the weekend of Christmas break. But the New England shoots were a very small piece of the puzzle. Most of the shoots would be happening in the Bahamas, which most of the crew who came from New York and Los Angeles were more than happy in the beginning of December to go shoot in a tropical paradise. I mean, who wouldn't be? Now, it should be said that the first 3 Jaws films each took 2 years to make because of all the complicated special effects. We all know the history that shark just wouldn't work. Jaws: The Revenge would be made in 9 months. Now, of course, you can have a child in 9 months, but you can't have a Jaws. Doesn't work. Jaws take longer in the womb. And believe it or not, Jaws: The Revenge actually set a record which wouldn't be broken for a long time. It was the shortest amount of time that a film had ever been produced, shot, edited, and in the can and in theaters. What film broke that record? Well, believe it or not, in 2002, the Colin Farrell film, Phone Booth. That movie was shot in 10 days, and it was supposed to come out in theaters in that November, which would have been like a ridiculously quick turnaround. Now, even though it had been shot in May, unfortunately, due to the DC sniper attacks at the time, they decided to hold the movie out until 2003. And even then, it was only 8 months after they completed shooting. So there you go. Colin Farrell's Phone Booth, quickest amount of turnaround for any film ever. Meanwhile, back at Jaws: The Revenge, previously on Jaws: The Revenge, delays caused by the mechanical sharks and weather led to concerns about whether the release date for this film would ever be met. At this point, because of technical issues, Joseph Sargent had gone on record saying that Jaws: The Revenge was a ticking time bomb waiting to explode because of all the production issues. Now, we know that things go wrong on movie sets, and that's a large part of this show and what we talk about. But like, pretty much with Jaws: The Revenge, it was something every day. Like, every day something went wrong. Whether it was the snowstorms, whether it was the underwater photography not working because they're working with this new super 35mm technology, everything was a hassle. The original was no exception. They had their difficulties on that, but they were doing it without a net. It was the first time. So a myriad of ideas were thrown around early on, with Sheinberg himself paying various effects artists to create alternatives in a quick fashion, because we can't get these sharks working for whatever reason, because it is what it is. We'll get into that. At one point, they decided, we're going to make the shark stop motion. You know, like if you watch Clash of the Titans, the Ray Harryhausen stuff. Because of the time constraints, people went on saying that the shark they created via stop motion looked like a log with popsicles for teeth. It didn't work, and it didn't look like a shark. So what do then? They call up some of Jim Henson's people, and they say, we're going to use smaller puppets. But guess what? The puppets looked even worse than the stop motion stuff. So they're like, well, we got to go back to the drawing board. I guess we're using these big ass mechanical sharks again. So Sheinberg figured he could film all of this stuff simultaneously and try to get ahead of the effects work. But the problem was that none of these effects worked, and they had to go back to the original plan, which was to have these gigantic 2,500-pound mechanical sharks. So when the movie begins on Amity Island, you see that first shark attack, and you really don't see the shark at all because the effects don't work. It was as if history was repeating itself, because these were the same exact things that had happened on the original Jaws. And it's like they say, if you don't learn from your failure, you're doomed to keep repeating it. So when you're shooting things on salt water, it's damn near impossible to control the environment. You don't believe me? Ask Kevin Costner why Waterworld was such a disaster to film. Look, I don't know much, folks, but what I do know is that you probably shouldn't shoot near the ocean, especially if you're a first-time director. Luckily, though, this was exterior work and not that big of a deal. But what was a big deal was the middle of November, shooting in New England and already having this nasty winter. Everybody was freezing and they couldn't wait to get to the Bahamas to start shooting. Now, again, they spent $25 million shooting this movie. So they hired over 250 extras. They had an entire marching band, a chorus. It was great for the local economy in New England, pumping in a ton of money. And lucky for them, with all the snow, it really did look like everything was happening around Christmas. So it did add some production value, even though it pretty much almost delayed production for about a month. And again, this movie has to come out. We're shooting this the end of November, and this movie has to come out in theaters for July 4th weekend. Now, Mitchell Anderson from Space Camp, that was basically his big starring role, he'd be the fourth person to play Sean Brody. And just like his dad, he became a cop. And you would later know Mitchell Anderson because he's on Doogie Howser. That's pretty much how he became a household name. Now, it's unfortunate because Anderson thought that he was going to be a star once he got cast in Jaws: The Revenge. Little did he know that he signed on to the movie without reading the script, that he dies within the first 10 minutes. Like literally, you saw this guy's on screen for like 8 minutes and he dies. So now Mike Brody, played by Lance Guest, has become a marine biologist, and obviously his brother gets eaten, so he has to come home and visit his family, console his mother. I mean, what do you think they put in that coffin? Like, he got eaten by a shark. How much was really left of him? This is pretty messed up. I don't want to think about it, but I'm just saying, like, if you get eaten by a shark, what's in the coffin? You know, an arm, a leg? You want an arm? You want a leg? It's like Goodfellas. Now, what's crazy about this was originally this part, the whole part that was played by Mitchell Anderson, that was going to be Roy Scheider, where he would have been, I think it was a total of 9 minutes of screen time, where it's Chief Brody's locking up the dock for the night, and then he just gets eaten by the shark. So basically, Martin Brody is written out because he had a heart attack, which is a real boner killer for such a great cinematic character. You know, you look at Scheider's character as this thing of legend. And how does he die? It is a heart attack. Well, I guess it's plausible. It happens in real life, but it's very anticlimactic for something of the caliber of Jaws. So basically, Michael comes back and he tells his mother, look, you need to get away from here, blah, 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 blah. I mean, how hard is it to convince somebody to go to a tropical paradise in the middle of a crappy New England winter? So now, Lorraine Gray's character is convinced that the attack on Sean was personal. I guess we should really get to what made this movie famous. It's the tagline. This time, it's personal. which most people saw as a joke. And the tagline became a big punchline, to be honest with you. People, once they heard that tagline, like, oh, this is ridiculous. So now Ellen Brody, okay, wait, this will make sense, or just give me a second here, folks. In the earlier versions of the script, and even in the novelization, Ellen Brody claimed to have a personal connection to the shark. Just hear me out here. They toned it down in the movie, but in the Marvel Super Special adaptation of the movie, which is largely based on the novelization, she dreams of the shark and then feels its presence like it's speaking to her telepathically. Now, luckily, somebody did say that this was ridiculous and we can't use this in the movie. This is barely 15 minutes into the movie, and she's having dreams about her psychic connection to the shark. I mean, it's so bad. Like, it's so bad that we're doing this. Like, you know, Jaws is like one of the greatest American movies. And now we're at Jaws 4, and the wife is having dreams about the shark, and she feels that there's some kind of bizarre connection between her and the shark. And this can't be the original shark. It's not even the second shark. You know, in the first one, they blew the shark up. In the second one, they electrocute the shark and blow it up. And the third one, I don't even know, because the third one's so bad, I usually fall asleep. You know, it sucks. Louis Gossett Jr. is in that movie. I blow him up too. Yeah, okay, that checks out. Notes from producer Pete. They blow the the only way you can kill a shark, you got to blow it up. It's like the Highlander. You got to cut off its head. It's so bad, and I wish they would have committed to it. I really do. Like, if you're going to get stupid, let's get stupid. So Ellen believes that the shark has a personal vendetta against her and her family, and that it's best for this Christmas, everybody go to the Bahamas in order to hide from the shark. This is the movie. This is actually the movie. Season 4, baby. We're getting into the weeds.
We'll be right back with more of The Offering with Jerry Horror.
It's always Halloween at the Haunted House of Hamburgers, Long Island's only Halloween-themed restaurant. At Haunted House of Hamburgers, they are obsessed with both Halloween and hamburgers, so why not have the best of both worlds every day? Salivate over their delicious hamburgers during Boo Brunch, along with their Witch's Brew and Crypt Keeper cocktails. Or take a stab at the undead desserts, such as I Scream Sundays, with your bobbing for apple pie. My favorites are the Afterlife alcoholic shakes. I'd go for the Pentagram Passion Fruit, or the Exorcism Espresso Martini Shake, or my go-to, the Loch Ness Monster Lobster Rolls. This place is fun as hell. They even encourage you to come dine in, dressed in costume. Your kids will love that. Or that could be one hell of a memorable first date. They're not going to forget that, right? Here's a little insider tip. For a far-out, trippy dining experience, ask your waiter for 3D glasses. It's pretty rad, let me tell you. Located at 330 Fulton Street in Farmingdale, New York, it's the restaurant that looks like a haunted house. You won't miss it, I promise. Make Haunted House of Hamburgers your year-round Halloween destination. Stay spooky all year long at Strangelove Parlor, Long Island's exquisite oddities and curiosity parlor in Lindenhurst, New York. They've got some ghastly apparel. Strangelove Parlor supplies an array of goth jewelry, unisex horror-themed gear, Halloween accoutrement, monstrous purses and wallets, spooky pins, patches, and stickers, providing you with the most wonderful and the most strange of treasures. Visit Strangelove Parlor regularly to find the item of your dreams, or perhaps even your nightmares. Grab your ghoul gang and visit today. Strangelove Parlor in Lindenhurst, Long Island, New York. Listeners and fans of The Offering can get their hands on their very own The Offering with Jerry Horror merch, now only at TeePublic. Find your own fresh The Offering with Jerry Horror high-quality merchandise, including t-shirts, hoodies, tank tops, long sleeves, stickers, and mugs. Just like the show, we've got gear that's mostly horror, always genre. The Offering with Jerry Horror TeePublic store has everything you need to represent your favorite podcast. Folks, head on over to teepublic.com right now and pick up your very own Offering tee today. You're listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. Got a question or story you want to share with me? It might be featured in a future episode. Email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit me up on Twitter at jerryhorror. I'm also on Instagram. You can find me there at jerryhorror. Rate and review this show on Apple Podcast, and you might find your review in an upcoming episode. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to The Offering. Now back to the show. Now, as this film is shooting, the practical effects team that's dealing with the sharks is ready to go a month before anything started shooting. They were supposed to do all this unit work to show the 2,500-pound, 25-foot animatronics. And there were so many arguments at this point about what should be in the script and what shouldn't be. So while Sheinberg and Sargent are deciding what's going to actually be in this film, these guys had been ready to shoot the whole time. Unfortunately, a storm hits the Bahamas, and it takes out a bunch of the original sharks they were going to use. And that's why they started doing the whole stop motion and the whole puppet thing, because they had the sharks ready a month ago, but the delays, in that time there was this storm and it knocked them out. So now the new sharks that would be made, they would have a special warehouse to put them in the Bahamas so that they wouldn't be exposed to the elements. For whatever reason, Henry Miller and his team of effects artists couldn't get on the same page with the production. So what ends up happening? Well, let's just say there was a bunch of shots from the movie that they had to go to the Bahamas a month before the film came out and shoot all the new underwater footage with these fake sharks. Miller was quoted as saying, "We were doing 21-hour days. It's a miracle that no one got killed considering we're using 2,500-pound sharks in salt water." The second unit effects footage of the sharks that was shot was flown back every day from the Bahamas to editors in Universal so that they could start integrating the actual shark, into the shark movie. Do we see any problems with this? Whatever. Because you know what? Sheinberg was going to have Jaws Revenge, Jaws 87 in theaters for 4th of July weekend, internationally. Because check this out. They had tried this before, but it just didn't work. In a time before the internet age, it was almost impossible to do a global day and date release date. They do it all the time now, like with these big Marvel movies and stuff. They do like one day it comes out in India, it comes out in the UK. But doing this in 1987 was going to be a stretch of the imagination. So they end up shooting footage of these sharks until June 5th, less than a month before the film came out. They were still shooting shark footage, which of course didn't work. It was really hard to try to get that global release, but you don't even have the film done. It's a month before the film comes out. You don't have any of the shark footage. Back to the movie, Michael Brody is hunting down the shark with his Jamaican assistant, Mario Van Peebles, because he wants revenge. Hence the name Jaws: The Revenge. What's crazy is once they begin looking for the shark, this is where the novelization puts all the stuff in about the voodoo man. This was originally in the script, but it got cut because I think everyone realized how batshit crazy it was. The voodoo man was going to give Michael some kind of spiritual connection, some kind of superpower to track the shark. I'm not kidding. We're using voodoo. So the mother has a psychic connection. He has a spiritual connection. And I don't know what the shark thinks, but this is all getting really weird. But hey, we've got some technical advances. They shot this film with the Zeiss underwater cameras. The secret with the Zeiss lenses was that they could pick up this incredible amount of depth in the ocean that they had never been able to shoot. Like Jacques Cousteau wish he had these cameras. So that was new technology. So again, we've got the Zeiss cameras, the Super 35. We're making technical achievements. It's a terrible film, but there was a bunch of technical achievements that were able to be implemented on this film. Now, truth be told, they tried to shoot as much as they could in the ocean, but they ended up having to go to stage 27 at Universal Studios in Hollywood. And this is where they did all the underwater work and pickup shots, which there were many. Inside the studio, there were 2 of the largest ever water tanks produced, each holding 1 million gallons. Now, the exterior tank, which is the man-made Falls Lake, get it? Falls Lake. It could hold 3 million gallons of water, and they were able to do some of the stuff that was taking place in Amity. And they even said, we really didn't even have to shoot in New England. We could have just shot most of this stuff in a big water tank in the Universal Studios. So, hey, lesson learned. But I mean, they got the exteriors, I get it. But they needed to do some of the water stuff, obviously, because it was too cold in New England to shoot any of that stuff in November. So all the docks and all the stuff you see in the beginning of the movie, when Sean gets eaten, that's all shot in Hollywood. So they did a pretty good job matching it. The problem with the Bahamas recreation was they had to dye the water to match what they had shot, because in the Bahamas, they have this beautiful blue crystal water. Unfortunately, the dyed water, everything that would go in there would also be dyed to a blue pigment. So if an actor was in the tank for 30 minutes or so, it would dye your hair and your skin blue. It turned everything blue. Even the sharks that are like, kind of gray and white, they ended up looking blue because they were in the water so long that so the teeth, the whole shark looked like Cookie Monster. It was bad. They had put so much blue dye and had so much little time. Everybody was told, stay away from the blue water. We'll drop the shark in at the last minute. We'll drop the actors in at the last minute. We can't rehearse it, and we can't rehearse it because everybody will turn blue. This is insane. This is fucking insane. I don't even know what we're doing here. The other problem was recreating the Bahamas in Hollywood. So they bring in these massive screens, like something you'd see from a drive-in movie, and it replicated the perfect color of the sky in the Bahamas. And they were placed right behind the water tanks. And truth be told, a lot of this stuff does look like the Bahamas. It's very impressive, considering this is 1987. Now, the big action set piece for this movie was when the kids were in this gigantic banana boat. It's probably the most memorable scene. It's used in the trailers. This is what they sold the film on, was this banana boat scene. It was the most difficult thing to shoot in the entire production because there were a tremendous amount of effects that had to happen with these 2,500-pound sharks, as well as we've got kids on the banana boat. So now we got to deal with kids. And, kids can't work all day. So they're switching kids out. Most of the parents that had their kids in this production were like, oh, this would be great. My kid's in Jaws 4. It's going to be an opportunity. They didn't realize just how dangerous it was working out in the water in the Bahamas with 2,500-pound sharks and their children. It was actually very dangerous. And some people actually pulled their kids out. They're like, listen, I'm not gonna have my daughter die because you're trying to make a new Jaws movie. So Scheinberg told the people who were in the area, said, listen, we'll pay your kids to be on the banana boat. And it was really messed up what they did. I think a lot of parents said, if I would have known that they were going to be with these fake sharks and how dangerous it was, I would have never let this happen. But they cashed a check. They did, Pete. They cashed a check. They said whatever. All the way up until late May of 1987, we're still shooting. Don't forget that second unit stuff doesn't get shot until the beginning of June. This film had to be out by July 4th. By all accounts, nothing was easy on Jaws the Revenge. Everything was a pain in the ass to shoot on this production. And at the end of the day, whether you love it or hate it, it's a miracle that this film even got made, considering everything they went through. So they decided, listen, we got to put out a teaser trailer. They had very little film from the movie itself to work with. So they basically used a lot of B-roll from the other Jaws films. That and stuff they were able to get from like National Geographic. And this is where the advertising campaign comes in, and we first hear the tagline, "This time it's personal." Now let me just get this out of the way. In the film's novelization, Michael Caine's character Hoagie is a deep cover agent for nefarious forces. He's a Shades of Grey character. There's an entire chapter in the novelization. This was in the script. It got cut out, explaining all about his espionage and his money laundering scam. It was all cut out, just like the Voodoo Man. I will say this, Jaws the Revenge is a lean 90 minutes. And all those extra silly storylines probably would have made this a 2.5-hour movie. I think that's probably for the better that we got a 90-minute movie. But man, there's a part of me that wants to see that 2-hour and 30-minute cut of Jaws the Revenge with all this wacky stuff. Oh, so the novelization, unlike the screenplay, gives Voodoo Man a name. He's called Papa Jacques. He's an old Haitian witch doctor who apparently, for some reason, has decided to make this shark kill this entire family. We're not sure why, but hey, wacky Haitian voodoo, who cares? None of this makes any sense. And it was in the original script. And the only way you can find out about Papa Jacques and Hoagie's adventures is in the official novelization. Some people say that novelization is batshit crazy, and that it's actually better than the film we got. Okay, so where were we? So the shark is stalking the Brody family because of voodoo, and everything the family is experiencing is because of the evil of Papa Jacques, who we don't know why, but he's decided to sick a shark after the Brody family. Not quite sure. Allegedly, Voodoo Man had a connection to the first Jaws, and it was like his pet shark or some bullshit. And this is really bad. Like, how could you write this and turn this script in? Like, look, producer Pete and I aren't rocket scientists, but we're not gonna, we're not gonna write the next Fast movie and be like, all right, well, Dominic Toretto, voodoo. Yeah, voodoo's coming after the family. Also cut from the movie in the novelization. This is my favorite part. There is an entire sequence where we are in the POV of the shark, and the shark is confused. It doesn't know what's happening because it's under the effect of Papa Jacques' voodoo. And they shot this. It was going to be in the movie. I'm not sure if it would have made it better or worse. I think better. We're shooting from the shark's POV. Like, we're getting, like, what is the shark feeling? So there's this entire sequence where we're seeing through the shark's eyes. They cut it from the movie. Rightfully so. Even more shocking was that Ellen Brody gets involved with a gangster romantically, and then Michael Caine like beats the shit out of the guy and it becomes this thing. They cut it out of the movie completely because they remove, and what's crazy is they removed the original mob subplot from the first film. In the original Jaws, Mayor Vaughn was involved with the mafia. It's in the Peter Benchley book, and they cut it out of the movie, probably rightfully so. But I gotta say, the mob, can't get a break in these Jaws films. They keep getting cut out. I don't know. On July 1st of 1987, the original Jaws the Revenge novelization was written by Hank Searles. It was released. Searles had written the novelization for Jaws 2. Quite a few people have told me that the novelization for Jaws 2 and for Jaws the Revenge were better than the actual movie itself. History repeating itself again. He didn't write the adaptation for Jaws 3. It didn't get a novelization. I don't know why. Maybe they couldn't put the novel in 3D. I'm not sure. So even though this novelization, which would later be turned into the Marvel one-shot super special, all of these wacky things probably might be the best version of this film. Now, I know like all of it sounds crazy, but I'm telling you, dude, if this movie had Papa Jacques the Voodoo Man and all this wacky stuff, I think this movie people would be like, yo, you got to watch this Jaws movie. It's crazy. So the finished film removes almost 60 minutes of these various subplots. Again, 90 minutes lean. You can say what you want to say about Jaws the Revenge, but it is 90 minutes lean. So let's get to the release of this film, because at this point, it should be no surprise to any of our listeners, but Jaws the Revenge did not come out on July 4th weekend because it wasn't even done yet. It did, however, come out on July 17th. Now, why is that? Because they were still editing the movie 4 days before the film came out. This was like the quickest they ever rushed the prints into production to get them at theaters. Some theaters didn't get them until Saturday. Traditionally a movie comes out on Friday. Some of the theaters didn't get the prints until like Sunday afternoon, which is insane. Scheinberg demanded that the film be chopped down to 90 minutes so that it could play more times at a movie theater. Because if it's 2.5 hours, you can have maybe 5 shows. With this, he was thinking like Menachem Golan of Canon Films. Even if the film is a stinker, at least they'll be able to get twice as many showings, meaning twice as much money. And believe it or not, Jaws the Revenge is one of the most expensive movies made of 1987 at $25 million. Some people say it's closer to 34. It depends on what you believe. I think it was probably $30 million that this was made for. And unfortunately, for Jaws, the film going public, the big shark would have a showdown. So they released Jaws the Revenge. Guess what movie it goes up against? RoboCop. And of course, all my listeners know that RoboCop is the best movie ever made, and that's all we need to say about that. Let's just say that Jaws the Revenge opened in 3rd place the weekend that it came out. The number 2 movie in the country was a re-release of the Walt Disney classic Snow White and The Seven Dwarfs, and of course, topping the box office was RoboCop. So there was no competing because RoboCop was really this fresh thing. It was inventive, it was violent, it had cross appeal for kids, for people who liked science fiction. So ultimately, by the end of the year, Jaws the Revenge would go on to gross $20.7 million with a budget of allegedly $25 million, and then another $10 million for advertising. So Universal is thinking to themselves, oh man, we're going to lose like $15 million on this movie. Now, luckily, because they didn't get it 4th of July weekend, they didn't get it July 17th, most of the other countries start getting this movie in August overseas. They made another $30 million overseas. And they even tried to release it simultaneously in some of these territories, but some of the theaters didn't get Jaws the Revenge. In India, they didn't get it until the end of August. The overseas box office saved this movie. If this movie didn't play as big as it did in the UK and as it did in Japan, it would have been a total loss. In the end, the film grossed $51 million, and some people think that because of all the costs associated with this movie, that it barely broke even. The whole plan with this movie was to push a theme park ride and make some cash. They pushed the theme park ride, they made a crappy movie, and they really didn't make much money when it was all said and done. This was the first and only Jaws film to land a PG-13 rating. Overseas and in places like England, they edited out 37 seconds of gore so they could sell it as a PG-13 film over there. Eventually, when the film came out on home video, they put the 37 seconds back in and subsequently rated it PG-12 for home release in the United Kingdom. Now, throughout the years, there have been multiple cuts of this film. Most notably, what's been removed is a lot of the sequences of people getting their limbs ripped off by the shark. So really, any censored version that you see of this doesn't have any of those lingering shots of the aftermath of the shark's carnage. There's like 20 different cuts of this movie, but it was basically done. There's also extra scenes that aren't in this theatrical cut, and the reason that that's done is to pad out time for commercials. It's very commonplace to do this in the 80s, because everything was about showing these movies on television, and then, ultimately cable television. The critics, though, were about to have their own feeding frenzy of a bloodbath. Jaws the Revenge was panned by just about everybody. Roger Ebert of the Chicago Sun-Times gave the film 0 stars. Ebert said, writing in his review, "It is not simply a bad movie, but also a stupid and incompetent one. It's ultimately a waste of everyone's time." On the Siskel and Ebert TV show, Gene was pretty much on the same page as Roger, and they both gave the film 2 thumbs way down. Now when they didn't like you, you got 2 thumbs down. But when they said 2 thumbs way down, they really did not like it. Gene Siskel stated of the film, "Nothing makes sense in this movie. Logical errors amongst many other illogical errors. A lot of things just don't make sense. And I really do hope that this is the end of the Jaws saga for us and for the audiences." The Independent pointed out that the film was riddled with inconsistencies and errors. Sharks cannot float or roar like lions. Now, yes, this is the film where the shark roars like a lion. Where did that roar come from? It actually came from a Tom and Jerry cartoon that Universal had access to. They owned it, and that's where they took the roar from. So, I don't know. I like the shark roaring, personally, because it's a shark, but it's quiet. It's quiet. But in this movie, the shark makes noise. He growls, he roars. Some people think that's stupid, but I'll tell you what, this is a stupid movie. So when you got a stupid movie, you add a little bit of pizzazz, goes a long way. So, hey, back off. Ultimately, Jaws the Revenge is a very bad film. In some ways, it's so good it's bad, but from another perspective, in my opinion, it's just bad. It's not a good movie. It's got some interesting stuff. Like I said, that stuff with the banana boat, fantastic. Great. At the 8th Annual Golden Raspberry Awards, Bruce the Shark, this was the first and only time that a foam rubber shark was nominated for Worst Actor. He was the first animatronic creature ever nominated for an award. So if you're keeping score of that shit. It would also be nominated for Worst Director, Worst Screenplay, Worst Movie of the Year, and in fact, everybody from Michael Caine to Lorraine Gray would get nominated for their acting, even old Lance Guest. The film, however, would win for Worst Special Effects. The word was out, and the word on the street was that Jaws the Revenge was a stinker. And as of this recording, Jaws the Revenge holds a 0% on the tomato meter and 15% on the audience score. Was there a video game? You bet your sweet ass there was a video game, because released in November, right in time for the Christmas season, Jaws for Nintendo's OG 8-bit NES console was released. This was an LJN game. It had you hunting down the shark. I remember fondly playing this game. I liked the video game. It was a terrible game. Things were terrible back then. I don't know what to tell you. There was AIDS, there was crack, there was a lot of bad things happening in the world. And, why should the Jaws video game for NES be any different? But I would play this game. I'd be upstate with my family in Lake George. It's not an absolute banger, but it's one of the better LJN games. On February 14th, yes, Valentine's Day, 1988, Jaws the Revenge came out on VHS. Shockingly, it did pretty well because people were curious enough to see if it was as bad as everyone had said it was. It did very well on VHS. Incredibly well. I think because the word of mouth was so bad, people were like, let's see if this thing's really a piece of shit. Could you imagine that? You go into the video store with your family and you're like, you know what? I heard this sucks. Let's see if it sucks. And then you watch it and you're like, yeah, that sucked. A Laserdisc version was released later that same year. Shockingly enough, in May of 2001, Jaws the Revenge was the first film in the series to be released on DVD, and it was distributed by none other than budget title master Good Times. Man, to the real OGs, if you had some of those horror titles that Good Times put out, they put them out on like SLP, and it was like the shittiest quality you could get, but it was a $2 cassette, whatever. This film would come to Blu-ray in June 14th of 2016. This was the first time it had ever been in high definition. And just recently, as of this recording, in June of this year, we are getting a fully remastered version on 4K. It finally happened, folks. We made it. The dream is alive. Now, shockingly, the craziest part about all this was when Jaws was shown on television, there's all these different cuts. Every network had ones. Some had more footage, some had less. Some elements were cut out. Shockingly enough, the version that AMC airs has additional footage of Lorraine ramming the shark, and there's a lot more shark gore than any of the other versions floating around on TV. So if you have seen the AMC version of this, it really does have a lot more of Jaws being tortured, and I appreciate that because I like shark gore. There's some goofy stuff that they shot so they could integrate more television stations and commercials more easily. It is what it is. There's a scene with Michael Caine playing the guitar for the kids. Does anybody care if that fucking scene is in there? Nobody cares. For all you weird Jaws the Revenge purists, that's why I'm stating this stuff. So at this point, we're splitting hairs. Doesn't matter. You can add more footage. You can add less footage. It doesn't make the movie any better or worse. But I do like when there's more gore, but that's me. That's how I get down. Regardless of what cut you watch of this film, they just all kind of stink. And unless you have a cut of this film that has the Voodoo Man Papa Jacques, I don't give a shit. You got that footage? You got that footage of that guy? I'm in. I'll go see it in the movies tomorrow. You tell me the Voodoo Man's in there. One thing for certain was that the film was shot in a 4:3 aspect ratio because they were using the Super 35mm cameras. That said, when this thing was released in theaters, projectionists really had to make sure that it was aligned properly to get the aspect ratio right. It was formatted to appear in widescreen. This said, most of the early broadcasts on TV look like dog shit because they've been all cut up and sized weirdly because most films didn't get shot on Super 35. It's a weird aspect ratio. So if you saw it on video and you saw it on TV in the 80s and the 90s, it looked like crap. I only include this stuff for you completionist nerds. You know who you are because there's people who will take me to task for this, so whatever. At the end of the day, it's a bad movie. It simply doesn't have enough wacky, fun stuff in the original script. I think that would have been good. I mean, look, it's not terrible. It's serviceable. Like I said, you throw this on, it's 90 minutes. You're in, you're out. The shark attacks, we kill the shark, we have a couple of Bahama Mamas, we call it a day. But ultimately, it pales in comparison to the other films. And that's really not saying much because, look, hot take, I'll take Jaws 4 over Jaws 3. I don't like Jaws 3. And you know me, I'm a big 3D nut, and there's a couple of cool pop-out scenes, but that movie sucks. Lorraine Gary's performance is shockingly one of the best parts of this film. She holds her own against Michael Caine, and that's pretty, admirable. Caine is so breezy in this film, I gotta tell you that. You pretty much realize that Michael Caine was on vacation and just occasionally acting in between pina coladas. Lance Guest is pretty good too. Mario Van Peebles, he's writing his own dialogue. He's Jamaican. It's ridiculous. I love it. 10 out of 10. No notes. Truth be told, the actors in this film are probably the best part. I like seeing the shark a lot. You see the shark a lot in this movie, and he's doing stuff. And I like that because I like seeing this big, dumb rubber shark. And I realize it's probably hokey. It's not for everybody. We're getting to the climax of this film, and the shark is taking down a small plane. Why is he doing it? There's no meat on that plane, but he's taking it. He's doing it again. Again, the shark has like this weird, it's operating on its own level. So it's like, oh, you know what? You brought a plane here? Fuck you. Still, with that being said, I enjoy all this rubbery shark nonsense. I think it's silly, and it makes me happy, so I don't care. The movie reminds me of what the Universal Studios ride was like, which to this day, if you go to the Universal Studios Japan theme park, you can still go on the Jaws ride, and I've heard it's pretty dang cool. I've heard that the iteration that the Japanese have come up with is actually the best that they ever did, because they did one in Orlando, they did one in Hollywood, but supposedly a chef's kiss. They get things right there in Japan in them theme parks. While the film might be a misfire, I think that Sid Sheinberg was onto something. His intentions were to make a couple of bucks, promote this new ride, and truth be told, that ride at Universal Studios that I went on as a kid in Orlando was better than anything that they ever committed to the screen on Jaws the Revenge. That's the takeaway. I'm telling you. It comes to that point where it's like, we don't have any story to tell with this movie, but it'll make a really neat attraction for families to go and see at a theme park. And for that, Sid Sheinberg was ahead of his time, and I commend him. All right, you know what time it is. It's time for the Unhinged review. And look, I'm not going to try and oversell this, but I think this is the greatest Unhinged review that we've ever retrieved from the internet. This comes from Jose R. from Amazon. People say that Jaws the Revenge is the worst movie ever made. It's not. All caps. It's not. Lorraine Gray is so good in this movie, and she's so beautiful. It's no wonder that my wife looks a lot like her. This movie is great. This guy, he really liked Lorraine Gray so much he married her. This movie is great. It's got tons of action. Michael Caine and the shark roars. People are such haters. 4.5 out of 5 stars. That's it. I mean, come on. The shark roars. It's got Michael Caine. I'm sold. I'm going to watch it. Dude, this guy, he married a woman. Looks like Lorraine. That's crazy. It's like one of those things they talk about where it's like these like weird, like early turn-ons as a kid. You go, you have pizza, you see the waitress with the big boobs, and now the rest of your life, you love pizza and big boobs. That's how it starts. It always starts with the pizza and the big boobs. Don't let anybody ever kid you. That's fucking crazy. That's crazy, man. So this dude, he went out and he married a woman who looked like this actress. And it's so fucking bizarre because like this is her only starring role. I could see like, oh, I've always had a thing for Sofia Vergara or whatever. And, she's so hot. I'm going to find a woman who kind of looks like her. But like Lorraine Gary, whatever her fucking name is. I probably fucked that up 100 times on this episode. It doesn't matter because it's Jaws the Revenge. Who gives a shit? This movie's terrible. Who are we fucking kidding? Oh, man. Folks, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us on the season premiere of The Offering. This is going to be a wild ride this season. Some of these movies, some of them are good. So there's some movies that are bangers. Look, and I'm not even saying Jaws Revenge. It sucks. It sucks. But it's, you know what? It's got the big rubbery shark. It's fine. You could do a lot worse. Producer Pete and I are watching the climax of this film. It's playing out before our very eyes. And it is incredible. Absolutely incredible. This film is a breathtaking masterpiece of stupidity. Even the way like Lance Guest is yelling at the shark right now, it's the way you would yell like in Die Hard, you yell at Hans Gruber like, Hans. It's insane. Just absolutely insane. What a masterpiece. Folks, you can find me on social media, on Instagram, or on X. I hate saying that. I like saying that I'm on X. It makes it sound like I'm doing drugs in a bathtub or something. That's sexy, right? Bathtub drugs. You know what I'm saying? Like, cocaine's cocaine, but if you're sitting in the bathtub doing cocaine, you're a baller. You're Tony Montana level. You know, because anybody can do drugs, but can you do drugs in the bathtub? That's when you know you got money. That's when you know you got privilege. Your kids are going to the good schools. So that's working out there. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. If you didn't, go fuck yourself. I don't know what to tell you. You know, there's other podcasts. They've made other podcasts. You can go listen to any of them, but you can listen to our whole back catalog. Sick plug for our back. It's not even a specific episode anymore. Just go listen to the other ones. We've done over 50 episodes now. We are taking names and kicking ass. It's incredible. Who would have thought this little podcast that could? Anyway, again, thank you for listening to this wonderful show. I really appreciate it. I promise that the next episode will be much better. And even then I could be lying, but it'll be much better. Am I lying? Yes, I am. We have just gotten to the end of the Jaws Blu-ray or whatever the hell we're watching. Watching Jaws on stream, Jaws the Revenge. And originally they killed the Mario Van Peebles character. And audiences were like, no, you can't kill the fake Jamaican man. And he has a terrible wig. And it looks even worse when he's in the water, half bleeding to death. So everybody got upset. So they went back and they shot some stuff in the Universal tank, and they said, he's not dead. So they had to shoot this whole other sequence. I think it cost them a couple $100,000. It is what it is, man. You know, look, it's like Barry and Levon, you know, from the state. It's like, we had a couple of extra $100,000 and we had to shoot that scene. We had to bring him back, had to do it. So Mario Van Peebles is okay. I think that he doesn't have an arm. I'm not sure anymore. But yeah, he survived somehow. And at the end of this movie, the former Mrs. Brody gets on a little Cessna plane with Michael Caine, and they're just gonna bone. That's it. That's Jaws the Revenge. It's a perfectly competent film, shot on film. It's a terrible movie. It really. And I got to tell you, with this movie, they don't waste any time. Boom, right to credits. Like, the credits can't wait. The credits are like, should we be coming up now? Because Jesus Christ, you guys did. Oh, well, I guess Mario Van Peebles didn't die. So they fly off into the sunset. Happy ending. Is Papa Jacques anywhere in the credits? I'm just checking to see if Voodoo Man, Papa Jacques, he is not in the credits. He did not make it to this cut of the film. That is a shame. We'll find out later in this season. The arc for me this season is that I'm possessed by the spirit of David Letterman. It's going to be a banger of a season. We've only got upwards to go from Jaws the Revenge. Ladies and gentlemen, freaks behind the paywall and friends beyond the binary, I'm Jerry Horror. This has been The Offering. Mostly horror, always genre. You've been listening to The Offering with Jerry Horror. I'm very sorry. Produced by Pete Bune. If you have a question or a story you want to share with me, we'd love to hear from you. You can email me at jerryhorror@gmail.com or hit us up at Twitter @jerryhorror or on Instagram @jerryhorror. You getting the picture? Subscribe to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are provided for you and your family. I want you to enjoy. Just join us next time for another offering.
This has been a Sick Boy Wolfgang production. Thank you for listening.